Hey guys, it's Jill. Jen and I wanted to give you a heads up about the content on today's episode. It may be triggering for more sensitive audiences. Refer to the show notes for more specifics. And take care while you listen. On this episode of Common Mystics, a 1980 murder is overshadowed by one witness's testimony that turns the entire case upside down. I'm Jennifer James.
I'm Jill Stanley.
We're psychics.
We're sisters.
We are Common Mystics. We find extraordinary stories in ordinary places. And today's story takes us to Oak Park, Illinois.
That's right. We were celebrating finishing our book. So this is March 29th, 2020. And this is one of our notes that we put on the back burner because it was just like us with Jenny having a good time.
I think it was 2023, right?
Yeah, what did I say?
2020.
2020? Yes. No, it was not 2020. It was
okay.
not. It was
I just want to clear that up. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah,
you're
March
welcome. I didn't want to think that we zoomed into the future for this one. I mean, anything could happen.
It would. I mean, we've zoomed into the past. Why not the future? Anyway, we pick up Jenny and we are headed to Wrigleyville to the Zachary Hotel. But on the way, we were getting our Spideys on and we drove through Oak Park, Illinois.
Right. And of course, we had our intention going.
Jennifer, what is our intention?
Our intention was, as it always is, to find a verifiable story previously unknown to us that allows us to give voice to the voiceless.
That's right. And what's interesting about Oak Park, Illinois, it's literally adjacent to the town that we grew up in, Forest Park, Illinois. Mm-hmm. So we've been there. We've been in the area a lot. We should know more about Oak Park than we do. It turns out we're pretty ignorant, as always.
As always. What's
what
new?
Are you gonna do? So some of our hits, we pulled over at a park and I was feeling like Austin Avenue has something to do with our story. What were you experiencing?
A feeling of witchcraft or supernatural powers.
I like it. I was feeling a Catholic connection or like a church connection. Mm-hmm. And usually when I feel like a Catholic connection, it doesn't have to be specifically Catholic, but I'm Catholic, so my circle of reference is like Catholic.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was also feeling a tragedy that affected the community in a big way.
Okay. And I was feeling that it still haunts. Like it's not laid to rest yet.
Yeah.
It still haunts the neighborhood.
Yeah. Well, this is a pretty recent story.
It is. What else were you feeling?
I think that's about it. Other than I felt like I couldn't catch my breath. You know what I mean?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Like I was almost like I was being attacked. You know what I mean? Like heaviness on my chest, that kind of thing.
Ambush. We were feeling ambush.
Uh-huh.
So this, based on the notes and the area we were in, we stopped at a park right adjacent to the Oak Park Public Library. And that's where we were getting our feels on. And so, of course, we had to drive to Austin and then north on Austin. So this is what I found. Jennifer, can you tell me about the vision that came to a gentleman on Friday, October 3rd, 1980?
You're so dramatic, Jill.
It is dramatic, though.
You know, I will say that we've never done a story like this before, and I'm surprised that this is what we're talking about because it's so different from what we usually. So I'm excited to get into it.
Oh, I'm so excited! That makes me happy.
So it was Friday, October 3rd, 1980. You were a few months old. In case you're wondering.
Was just a baby.
And on this day, on October 3rd, 1980. 26-year-old Bible school student named Steve Linscott, along with his wife Lois and their two young children, were just having a regular, quiet evening in Oak Park, Illinois. Now, the family had recently moved to Oak Park from Maine, and they were living at the Good News Mission on Austin Avenue, where Stephen served as director while also attending a Bible school. How do you like that?
He was all about the Lord.
All about the Lord.
Lord.
Amen. the Lord.
He's all right. Jesus is just all right with me.
But that night on October 3rd, something would happen that shattered the family forever. Now, Stephen and the rest of his family went to bed, and Stephen drifted off to sleep. But he had, by his account, a vivid, unsettling dream with images that began flooding his mind. Now, in his dream, he saw a young woman, and she was sitting in the living room of a house or apartment, and she was talking casually to a man who was with her. The man appeared to be in his 20s with straight blonde hair, a husky build, and a height of about 5'5". He was dressed in brown trousers and a striped terry cloth shirt. Terry cloth?
Yeah, remember those shirts in the 80s? You have to know what I'm talking about.
I think they were a 70s thing that bled over into the beginning of the 80s. They were terrible. So you could like take a shower and dry yourself with your shirt.
So terrible. And I want to come back to that because it's going to come back later. I want to have a discussion about that.
About the terry cloth shirt?
Yeah.
Did you have anything terry cloth?
I'm 100% sure. If you had something terry cloth, I'm sure I squeezed my fat ass into it sometime.
I remember like a jacket or a sweater that was like terry cloth. Anyway, let's keep going. So the man in this vision was wearing brown trousers and a striped terry cloth shirt. And they seemed calm at first. But as the dream played on in Stephen's head, a shift occurred in the man's demeanor. And this left Stephen feeling uneasy. Something dark and sinister was bubbling beneath the surface. Startled, Stephen woke up in a cold sweat. I always do this. Yeah, I wake myself up from a dream if I get too scared.
Mm-hmm. I'm like, fuck this. I don't need to know.
Right.
Yeah.
So he woke up, he was in a cold sweat, he probably got a drink of water, turned around, and just dismissed the images as random dream fragments, and then fell back asleep. But as soon as he fell back asleep, the dream continued.
Have you ever experienced that?
No. Yes, I have.
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Okay. And when the dream returned, the scene had taken a horrific turn. The man in the dream, the one in the terry cloth shirt and the brown pants, he was no longer calm, but violent and brutal. And the woman was now crouched or lying on the floor, and she was being struck by the man repeatedly on the head. Stephen could feel her eerie resignation, as if she knew her fate was sealed, as if she knew that it would do no good to try to fight back. So she didn't struggle, and she didn't fight, and there was a chilling acceptance of the inevitable. Stephen woke again, and the vivid dream lingered, stayed with him, and clawed at the edges of his mind. And he couldn't have known then just how significant it would become. What seemed like a disturbing figment of his imagination would soon unfold into something far more real and far more terrifying than he could ever have imagined.
That's intense.
That is intense.
So he wakes up on Saturday,
right?
And he's not right. You know,
well,
how can you?
I mean, that's disturbing, but I wouldn't sound the alarms. I'd just be like, what the hell? What a weird dream. You know what I mean?
Right. But haven't you ever had a dream about like Dennis doing something and you wake up mad at him?
Oh, yes. That's happened.
So like this, I would assume he woke up kind of like shaken.
With like lingering feelings of like fear.
Yeah. Or like even trauma to watch that unfold.
Yeah. You know what's interesting? He's using his clairvoyance, not actively, but his clairvoyance was picking up on information, but also the emotional feelings of the two people, clairsentience, right? Anyway, join our class, April 24th. Email us, commonmystics@gmail.com. Okay. So the next day.
Saturday. October 4th.
The very next day, just after 1 a.m., so it's kind of in the middle of the night.
Mm-hmm.
Another man named Mohammed Azajejan.
You know, I want to say that although this is the middle of the night, it's the night transitioning from the 23rd to the 24th. So it's not really
From
the next
the
day.
3rd to the 4th.
Right. It's after midnight. So now technically it's in the early it's in the early hour mornings of October 4th. Okay. So this is what was happening elsewhere.
Another man named Mohammed Azajejan is my best guess of that last name, was jolted awake by a loud, relentless pounding that was echoing through the walls of his building, and the noise was coming from his neighbor's apartment. She was 24-year-old Karen Ann Phillips. He was alarmed, and so he went out of his apartment, went to her door, and he was knocking on it, hoping to get some answers. As if on cue, the pounding stopped immediately. But nobody came to the door. Nobody responded. After waiting in silence, he returned to his own apartment, uneasy. Moments later, the pounding resumed, but then faded into an eerie silence once again. Now, later that afternoon, police began questioning the residents of Oak Park living on Austin Avenue. They asked if anyone had seen or heard anything unusual, particularly during the night. When officers arrived at the Good News Mission, Steve chose not to share the details of his dream, but assured them that if he had any relevant information, no matter how trivial it may seem, he would report
silly.
it.
He said, no matter how silly it may seem, he will report it.
Oh, is that what he said? That's not what's in the outline.
And it's not a Jennifer mistake. It was a Jill mistake.
I'm not saying it was a mistake. I just didn't know he thought it was silly. Did he
said,
think it was silly?
Yeah. He was like embarrassed. You know how it feels to have a psychic impression.
100%.
You're embarrassed to be
Right.
like,
Right.
You know?
Yeah. No, at this point, I wouldn't come forward either with this dream.
However, Mohammed, I feel like
Muhammad should have called the cops.
Yeah. Like if I'm getting out of bed to investigate pounding in the middle of the night, that's some serious shit. You know what I'm saying? Like,
especially in a young woman's apartment.
Yeah. I feel like that was a real missed opportunity and the police should have been called. But that's just me. I'm not trying to blame Mohammed. I'm sure he's a wonderful man. I'm just saying I would have called. Okay.
So should we go to the next day? Sunday?
Yes, Sunday, October 5th, 1980.
Well, let's see what Steve's doing.
Check in on Steve-O.
Steve could not shake the unease lingering from the police visit the day before. Yeah, this is eating away at him. The idea that a strange dream might somehow connect to the police investigation gnawed at him. But he was unsure of what to do. So he turned to a fellow counselor at the Good News Mission for some advice. And his colleague said, "You know what, Steve? It couldn't hurt to reach out." So, after wrestling with the idea and whispering a quiet prayer, Steve made the decision to call the police and share what he had seen in his dream.
But this is the thing. He didn't want to do it without talking to his wife. So he was kind of like really like in prayer about it. And he wasn't so fast. And then Monday, October 6th, 1980.
Well, that's when an article came out in the Chicago Tribune, and it was entitled, "Woman Found Fatally Beaten." And it detailed an ongoing investigation by Oak Park police into the apparent murder of a 24-year-old nurse's assistant. Karen Ann Phillips was discovered bludgeoned to death in her apartment on 324 North Austin Boulevard. She was found with a severe head wound, and her nightgown was wrapped tightly around her neck. Phillips was rushed to the hospital, but pronounced dead upon arrival. So Steve reads the Chicago Tribune article.
And now he's kind of like flipping out.
he is flipping out because what he's reading is eerily similar to the nightmare that he had on the same Friday night that this murder occurred.
Mm-hmm.
And he was hesitant to come forward, but he just couldn't ignore the coincidence. So after talking to his wife for a long time, the two of them both decided, you know what, Steve, you need to come forward. Steve needs to come forward. And his wife Lois, was in support of this.
I almost can like hear the conversation, like God gave you this vision for a reason and it could help solve the murder.
Right.
Like you can just feel that was like an intention behind it.
Right. 100%, because they were God-fearing people.
Right. So how did the police take it? Were they like, Ghostbusters, what do you want?
Well, it was at 9:30 p.m. that same night that Steve called the Oak Park police and told them about the dream that he had about a murder on the same night the real crime had occurred. Now, how did they respond? The dispatcher urged Steve to write down every detail of the dream and promised that police would follow up with him soon. Now, right there, I almost feel like, I don't know, I have an alarm bell in my head about that.
About what?
Like, write down all the details. Like, you write it down. You know what I mean? Like, why?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you want me to write it down? You know what I mean? I don't know. It's weird. I don't know.
What had me, like, when I was reading this, that gave me the alarm bells is his coworkers reaching out, being like, it couldn't hurt. Like, to me, have you interacted with the police? Because I have.
Because you have, yeah.
That shit really could hurt sometimes. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Me with my background of me being a juvenile delinquent, I would be like, okay, what can I really offer here?
Right. Well, every time I hear like legal advice, like from a lawyer, they always say, shut the fuck up. Like, don't say anything to the cops. If the cops ask you to speak, you say, I want my lawyer, and shut the fuck up and don't say anything.
That's exactly right.
So you could tell that Steve and his family and his colleagues have no experience dealing with the po-po.
Oh, they sure don't. And the fact that the dispatcher's like, go ahead and write that down. You know what I mean? Like, just give me all the evidence-y things that you can think of.
Okay. So 2 officers did show up at Steve's home that evening, the same evening of the call. That's not good. And after reading his written account, one of them raised a curious question. Why hadn't Steve mentioned the murder weapon? The officer insisted that during their earlier unrecorded phone call, Steve had described the weapon as a blunt object, something like a tire iron. Okay, so what they're saying here is, in the call with the dispatcher, you mentioned this, but now in this written description, that's not there. Which story is it? There seems to be some inconsistencies here. Am I reading this right, Jill?
You're absolutely right. And still, Steve is just like, I don't know what you're talking about. like Steve mind is like, I'm doing the Lord's work. I'm fine.
Right. This is what happened. I don't know what I said. I wasn't giving a formal statement when I was talking to the dispatcher.
Exactly.
Right? And so Steve was like, hey, I don't think I said that. And he said that he hadn't included the description in his written account because in the dream, he couldn't identify what the object was. Like, it wasn't all clear to him. Like, the scene was not all crystal clear. Which is another thing that people who don't believe in, like, this stuff would understand. Like, oh, if you saw it happen, then what was, what kind of tattoo did he have? Do you know what I mean?
Right.
It's like it wasn't like HD TV.
So, like, in detours for this episode, I want to go back and talk to people about, like, people who are psychics or sensitive who experience, like, things like this
Yeah.
and when they should talk and when they shouldn't. Like,
Okay.
let's go through like
And never
what that,
talk to the police.
I mean, not unless you have an alibi or you have rapport with the police and they're reaching out to you. But like, I had a friend who literally was like, I'm having visions of a kidnapped girl. But I was like, okay, what additional information do you have like that can bring this girl?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you
Right.
just don't go like,
And-
oh, she's a. That is my concern. Like, don't just be like, I'm having visions of this kidnapped girl who's really kidnapped. And then they're going to be like, hey, what do you know? You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
I know she's kidnapped. No, unless you have something
Right.
of relevance that can steer the case in the right direction. And even then, your ass needs an alibi.
And an anonymous tip. Anonymous tip line.
Yes.
Leave an if you see that she's wearing a red shirt, call it into the anonymous tip line. I think she had a red shirt on.
Or he or whomever stole her had a red shirt on. You don't
Right.
have to be.
Right.
Yeah.
We're on the same page here, Jill.
Visit us on Detours so we could give you the street version of how psychic should work.
Oh, man. I'm feeling for Steve here. Steve is getting himself into some shit, and I don't like it because I like Steve.
Well, and I really want to know, like, I get it, Steve.
Yeah,
But
I get it too.
I totally get it. I
Yeah.
totally get it. And I
Right.
myself had said shit that I was like, this is so embarrassing. I do not want to say it. And for some reason, like, good came out of it. But I'm thinking, like, this is like heavy shit. This
This is
isn't
heavy.
like I had a dream of your dog the other day. This is like I've seen someone being bludgeoned to death.
Ugh, yeah.
Ugh. Okay, go on.
So as Steve retold his dream again, the officers started to scrutinize him. They were like, yeah, the similarities are really striking between the murderer that you're describing and your own physical appearance, Steve. Look in the mirror. Steve had straight blonde hair, fair complexion, stocky build, under 6 feet tall. He should have thought about that.
In his 20s.
I feel like Steve should have thought about that. But yeah. So when the officers wrapped up their questioning, they asked for Steve's help with the investigation. And
Which is so sneaky as fuck. You know what they did. They were like, well, this is helpful.
Right.
Hey, can we reach back and revisit this dream
Right.
of yours if we need additional information about your premonition?
And of course,
Steve,
Steve agreed.
oh,
Don't be Steve, people. Don't
Steve.
be Steve.
So,
Oh, man. Wednesday, October 8th, 1880. Oops, 1980. I'm used to doing the older,
I know,
the
I
older
know.
crimes. 1980.
so this is 2 days later. So
Right.
2 days later, now it's Wednesday.
So now he's in the police station.
Yeah, they call him and they're like, hey, let's go over that dream again. We have a nice conference room here. Why don't you come on in?
And you see what they're doing. Now they're looking for further inconsistencies in the way he's telling the story.
That's right, Jennifer.
So once again, sitting in a police station conference room, Steve recounts yet again his vivid dream that he had on October 4th between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. The dream was detailed. That included, again, a brutal beating, an attacker dressed in a terry cloth shirt, maybe it was white or off-white, with 2 red or purple stripes across the chest and 1 on the sleeve. Steve believed that the 2 in his dream, the woman and the man, knew each other because their interaction seemed familiar, seemed at ease at first. Okay. Now, when asked about the victim by the police, Steve described her as religious and somewhat intelligent, at least high school and maybe a bit beyond. That is a quote from Steve. He had the impression the attack took place close by in a living room, as large or larger than his own 4-room apartment. And the room was furnished with a couch and a stereo, giving the scene a disturbingly domestic feel. In the dream, Steve saw the victim and attacker talking, though he couldn't recall how long they spoke or what exactly was said. And then the mood shifted, and the attacker produced a dark metallic instrument that was tapered at one end and rounded at the other. Steve said it was kind of like the counterbalance on a clock.
That makes sense to me.
Without warning, the attacker began striking the woman on the face. The violence and detail of the dream lingered vividly in Steve's mind, leaving him shaken and unsure of its meaning. So he's like literally reliving this dream as he's talking to the police, and you know that doesn't look good.
No, that doesn't look good. Also, the only memory you have of something is
your
the
last time you remembered it.
Yes. So
Yes.
they keep asking him
Right.
about this horrific scene that his mind is probably trying to be like, no, and dropping things off and protecting him from.
His other mistake here is that he's giving impressions of the woman. She's intelligent. She's religious. Steve, you don't know this woman. Don't say things that make it seem like you do.
Yeah.
This is not helping you, Steve. See, Steve should have had some psychic learning.
Steve needed to have the psychic street talk that we're going to have at Detours because
Poor Steve.
like we talk to our tier 4 patrons all the time. Don't tell me the conclusion. Tell me what you're experiencing. Right? Give me what you're experiencing. For him to be like, she seemed religious. Well, why did she seem religious? What gave you that impression? Like, what feelings were you feeling? You see what I'm saying? Also,
I don't know that would have helped him here, but keep going.
I think he's in too deep now.
He is way too deep.
This shit needed to be talked about on Saturday morning. Like, okay, let's really talk about what we know. Because if he only saw the living room in the house, like where the attack happened, well, the police will see all that. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, so why? And terry cloth was a big deal.
It was a big deal.
So it's like, so just like a white t-shirt. Like, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing that could make this case move forward other than, hey, someone down the street knows quite a bit about this woman.
Right.
And what happened to her that night.
So after this interview with the cops, Steve was free to leave. Then Friday rolls around, Friday, October 10th, 1980.
Another 2 days.
Steve is called back again to the same conference room for another round of questioning.
And I just want to remind everyone that the most important time after a murder or a crime is the first 48 hours.
So we're well past that.
Well past that. So it seems like all their focus is on Steve. And the fact that Steve isn't aware of that he just keeps coming into the station and being like, the dream again? We want to talk about the dream again, huh? Like that to me is like, Steve, they're not looking at anybody else.
This time, an assistant state's attorney joined the conversation. They started the interview by reading him his rights.
Okay, Steve, now that is an indicator.
Doesn't it start with you have the right to remain silent?
Yeah, huh?
Okay, but he doesn't, because Steve once again recounted his strange dream and then agreed to provide blood, saliva, and hair samples, including head and pubic hair, which were promptly sent to the crime lab for analysis.
Now, this is in the early days of forensics, so all they can really say is like, that hair looks blonde. You know what I mean? Like, They really can't like do a match. They can be like, well, in the general population, about 400 people have this blonde hair, and it's like, so again, you're like, Steve, it's not like
it's not DNA.
It's not DNA.
Yeah, they can't extract DNA. They don't know what DNA is. You know what I mean?
All you're doing is giving them evidence of the guy that you already said looked like you.
Right. Poor Steve, was unaware of what was happening, apparently, and had no idea that while at the station, a group of policemen were questioning his wife, Lois, at the Good News Mission. They combed through their apartment and checked the soles of Steve's shoes, looking for clues. Panicked, Lois reached out to the head of the Good News Mission, who firmly advised that Steve should leave immediately and stay silent. Finally.
There you go.
But as soon as Steve stood up and announced that he was leaving, The tension exploded and the police blocked his way, accused him of killing Karen, and claimed that there was evidence that would put him in the electric chair. Yet, even after 2 grueling hours of intense pressure, Steve refused to confess. With no physical evidence to hold him, the police had no choice but to let him go. By the time he walked out, it was 3 a.m.
Steve.
By November 19th, the crime lab wrapped up its analysis of the evidence of the scene. So what happened next?
What happened next, Jen?
Just a few days later, on November 25th, Steve was pulled over while driving and arrested for the shocking October 4th rape and murder of Karen Ann Phillips, based on written and tape-recorded statements that he voluntarily made concerning his dream. Now, so Jill, when they read him his rights, he wasn't arrested before. They were just trying to scare him, right?
Right.
Okay, but they couldn't make him stay.
He gives me this John Denver kind of attitude.
Yes.
Like, you know what I mean? So he was like, sure, I'll help.
So naive, yes.
Oh, my God.
So at first, he was held without bond in Cook County Jail.
Been there. Been there.
Did they punch your card for all the jails in Illinois?
The smells from things that you, like, go through in life will never leave you.
Hey, are you going to tell a jail story on the Detours too? That might get people to subscribe.
You guys, I have, how many jail stories do I have?
All right, well.
I have a couple good jail stories.
Find us on Patreon for Detours, because I'm writing this down. You're going to tell some Jill in jail stories. Jail stories. I do not have any jail stories.
Well, you're boring.
I am. You know, these days I regret. No, I don't. I'm glad that you bring in the stories.
Well, I'm glad that I was a teenager and it was eventually expunged from my record. And I learned a lot of lessons. And one of which is don't talk to the fucking cops. Just saying. Like, even to this day, if I'm like in a store and a cop's like is behind me, I'm like, I didn't do it. I don't know who did it. Like, I'm like, I don't know.
That's true. All right. So he had a high bond. He's in jail. He's in Cook County. He has a high bond. It's $450,000, which is a F-load back in 1980. But everybody who knew Steve was like, this man is so innocent right now. His friends raised the money and he walked out on bond.
Whew.
But there was a trial, of course.
Of course.
And it kicked off 2 years later on June 1st, 1982.
Can you imagine how much weight I would gain in those 2 years knowing that this kind of trial is over my head?
Right. Because I imagine you'd lose weight in prison, right? So you'd be like bulking up. You know what I mean? Like
maybe Ozempic Jill, but like regular Jill would gain a lot of weight in this
prison?
Situation.
Okay. We'll
anywhere.
Keep going.
I mean, you can exchange shit in prison. I'll be like, I'll give you a carton of cigarettes for your Swiss rolls.
You know, you have some real intimate knowledge of the penal system, so we'll talk later.
Detours.
So at the trial, there was intense attention to, of course, Steve's mysterious dream, quote unquote dream.
That's
according
shitty.
To the prosecutors.
That's shitty and
that
passive aggressive, all quote unquote dream.
Prosecutors leaned heavily on the dream, arguing that its eerie details matched the facts of the murder too closely to be coincidence. In court, they played the infamous tape from Steve's first interview on October 8th, where he described the dream in chilling detail. According to the prosecution, the dream revealed information that only the killer himself could know, a confession hidden in plain sight. They focused on the parallels. The killer had short blonde hair. He was 20 to 30 years old. He was wearing a short-sleeved terry cloth shirt that was striped. And he used a blunt metal object resembling a tire iron to deliver 7 brutal blows to the victim's head and shoulders, all while the victim offered no resistance. And with these unsettling connections, the prosecution painted a vivid and damning picture for the jury.
But this is the thing. Not everything he said in the dream was actual. Like he said that there was a couch. She lived in a studio apartment. There was no couch. There was no stereo.
Oh.
So they were just focusing on the consistencies and not the inconsistencies. So I hope that Steve's lawyer got up and was like, yeah, but he was wrong about this. He was wrong about this. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
Why are we just focusing on the things that he was right about? It's obviously a dream because it wasn't literal in every sense.
Right, exactly. And of course, the physical evidence that they produced was the hair, the blood, and the swabs of different bodily fluids.
And so the only physical evidence they have is what Steve gave them, FYI, which really pisses me off. It's like, don't you guys do this like for a living? Shouldn't
Right.
you like go out and find that shit?
But remember, there was no DNA, right? They didn't know about DNA. And so really it came down to the blood types kind of match. And, about 15 to 20% of males have this characteristic. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's like ridiculous.
So oh, wait, hold on.
Yeah, no,
We
you're not
don't
wrong.
have to get into the blood types, right?
We don't have to get into the blood types.
Or the
Just
hair
know-
samples. Just know it was before the advent of modern DNA testing. So really, they didn't have any real physical evidence.
They really didn't have any real physical evidence, but at the time, you would gasp at this, right? Because
Sure.
it could potentially mean that you are one of the 5 million people that could have. And you're like,
Right.
It's like for the jury, they must have been like, well, hell, I mean, 1 of 5 million. How many people live on Austin? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Ultimately, the prosecution's case rested on 2 points: the dream and the forensic evidence. And that was the foundation of their argument. On June 16th, 1982, after 9.5 hours of deliberation over 2 days, a Cook County Circuit Court jury delivered its verdict. Stephen P. Linscott was found guilty of murder, but cleared of the rape charges.
Okay, this is another thing. Apparently, there's some controversy about the jury because when you're in a jury, you're supposed to be sequestered and you're not supposed to talk to people or read the paper. And apparently, there had been some kind of jury tampering in that way. Like they had access to papers, they had access to their families.
Oh.
That was what a claim was. I'm not sure how true it is because I only saw one source saying it, but that apparently was a thing.
Then on November 23rd, 1982, Steve was sentenced to 40 years.
So what happens next?
Steve. So he's in prison for a bit, and by August 7th, 1985, this starts a lot of back and forth between the Illinois Supreme Court and the appellate courts, going back and forth about the legality of the way the trial unfolded.
So let me tell you, the evangelicals in the area and like evangelical news and like Christian news, they were not having it. They were like, if God gave this man a vision, he came forward to try to help you guys, and now you're punishing him for it. So they put a lot of work together in fundraising, got money to get an appeals to his conviction. And they did, but it wasn't as easy as like, oh, here's an appeal, new trial. It was back and forth, legalese. Like the appeals court was like, yeah, there wasn't illegal significant evidence. And then like the Supreme Court of Illinois was like, yeah, but he really was convicted, even though, you know what I'm saying? And then the appeals court was like, nah, well, okay, but maybe we should just do a retrial. And then eventually the district attorney of Illinois was like, yeah, we're not going to do a retrial. And he just drops the charges. And that was on July 16th, 1992. Officially, Steve was released with all the back and forth in November of 1985.
Thank goodness.
So, thank goodness, but still, that's 7 years.
Of legal back and
right.
forth.
And depending on the community's funding to keep him out of jail.
Right.
That would feel, you would just feel so shitty. By the way, like the Christian news source that I was reading said it was obvious the devil gave Steve the dream.
I mean, that makes more sense than it coming from God at this point.
You ain't wrong.
On December 19th, 2002, the governor of Illinois pardoned Steve based on innocence, entitling him to automatic compensation for his wrongful conviction.
Yeah, he got like $60,150 for his time in prison, which is not really a lot. I mean, you can earn $60,000 a different way without being in prison.
Wow.
So what's next for old Steve?
Well, after an arduous 12-year ordeal, Steve Linscott and his family finally achieved the closure they had long sought. Today, Steve's still alive?
Yeah.
Nice.
As far as I know.
Today, Steve channels his life-altering experiences into his work as a psychotherapist, equipped with a master's degree in social work. His remarkable journey is chronicled in the book called Maximum Security from 1994. It is a poignant account of the trials and tribulations he endured. Another compelling narrative called Innocence, the True Story of Steve Linscott, was written by his friend Gordon Harrison in 1986, and it delves into the crime, the legal battles, and the intervening years with profound detail.
So the Linscott family drew unwavering strength from the support of their community and a powerful testament to the resilience and compassion that can emerge when you face adversity, and how the community was so focused on his innocence and putting their money where their mouth was to really get him out. So that is an amazing thing.
True.
But Jennifer, who's our voiceless?
Well, I mean, poor Karen was murdered.
Through all this, Karen,
nobody's looking into Karen.
No one is like even remembering Karen. If you Google this case today, it's all about his dream and him being guilty and not guilty and him being released and not released. It's totally not about Karen.
Aww.
She was murdered.
Aww.
And the police and their fuckery dropped the ball. And they let precious time go by.
Yep.
They took the attention away from Karen and put it on Steve. And the real killer is still out there.
Still out there. Wow.
So
let's talk a little bit about Karen, shall we?
Yes, she's
Who
really
is Karen?
cute. Tell me about her.
Karen Ann Phillips was born on April 29th, 1956 to Russell and Ethel Phillips in Rutherfordton, North Carolina. Her family later settled in Forest City, where Karen grew up. She was well-liked and well-rounded. In high school, she was an active member of the school band, and she loved music, and she loved her community. Karen's journey into higher education began in North Carolina, where she attended college before transferring to Aurora College in Aurora, Illinois, just 40 miles outside Chicago. She earned her degree. She had a passion for helping others and enrolled in nursing school at Presbyterian St. Luke's Medical Center in Chicago's South Loop.
How many times did I go there with something broken?
We were there a couple times. By April 1979, Karen had taken her next big step and rented her cozy studio apartment on 324 North Austin Boulevard in Oak Park, Illinois, only a short 20-minute commute from St. Luke's Medical Center in Chicago.
Which seems like a long time.
Yeah. Well,
but
no.
I get traffic. Because
Yeah.
it's like just right down the 290. She should make it there in like 15 minutes, but whatever.
She was known for her determination and drive, and she was working towards building a meaningful career in nursing. It's really sad. But there's more.
Yeah, tell me about in her free time, like hobbies, interests, what do we know?
So interesting. Karen was deeply dedicated to the practice of yoga, specifically a kind that I cannot pronounce. Kriya, Kriya?
That is my life, and I love that you did that. Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know, but I like what you did there. Okay, go on.
A spiritual discipline that emphasizes meditation and self-realization. Wow. She was actively involved with the Temple of Kriya Yoga in Chicago, and she was part of that community. Over the years, she formed a close bond with a respected Swami at the temple. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And she recognized Karen's commitment to spiritual growth. And inspired by her mentor, Karen began studying to become a Swami herself, embarking on a profound journey of self-discovery and service to others. What an amazing person. She was only
Really?
24?
Yeah.
Holy crap.
Yeah. And her high school yearbook pictures are the cutest thing on earth.
And this is before people were like before yoga was mainstream. Like before meditation was like a thing that regular people did. She was incredible.
She was incredible. Forward thinking, a part of a community. It makes sense for someone, a nurse,
She's
to
a
like
helper.
Yeah.
A helper and a night worker almost. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
she has that feeling about her.
I love that. I love that you
Karen.
said that. I can see that.
So the crime is still unsolved, Jill.
Yeah. Yeah. This crime still unsolved, Jennifer.
So how about this public service announcement? Do you want to go for it?
No, I want you to because you have such a good voice.
If anyone out there has any information regarding the 1980 rape and murder of 24-year-old Karen Ann Phillips, please contact the Oak Park Police Department. You can reach their crime tip line at 708-434-1636 or email them at police@oak-park.us.com.
I think just .us.
Your assistance could make a difference. But if you
do-
are psychic, don't call them with your impressions, please.
We will give you instructions and have you have a discernment as to what to say to the police in that situation. But I do want to say this. This crime is still unsolved.
Yeah.
And it is really overshadowed by the salacious events of Steve and his ordeal. But I think we can solve this. They reprocessed Steve's DNA in the 90s, and it turns out he is absolutely not the donor of the DNA found on Karen and in the apartment.
So he has 100% been proven not the murderer.
Exonerated. Absolutely. So my hope, and this is why I say this is solvable, is because usually when you have a violent crime, there's a national database called CODIS that you put those kind of DNA markers in. And this is a horrific personal murder. I feel like this person did it before or again. And if they just use CODIS, I hope they find this person. I believe that Karen's murder could be solved.
Well, I'm really surprised by our hits. When you were picking up on Austin Avenue, Steve and his family lived on Austin Avenue.
So did Karen.
Shut up right now. She lived on Austin Avenue too. Holy crap.
Lived 2 doors down from each other.
That's crazy.
Well, that explains the dream. Think about it.
Yeah, because they were in they were in the same community in physical proximity.
Right, and they were both going through some shit. Like he was in the state of mind for receiving, and that was happening, and she was probably calling out for help in her way. So I want to tell you about the symbol of witchcraft you were picking up on.
Oh, tell me about it. Yeah, what is that?
Okay, so the thing is, she was studying to be a Swami, and part of the how she was found was a symbol. Her fingers were made the symbol of the acceptance of death. And so when originally her body was found, they were like, what is this ritualistic symbol for? And so the temple had to do a press release saying that's what that means. This isn't witchcraft.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So there really was a witchcraft connection to this murder.
Mm-hmm.
That's
they thought,
insane.
just because people are so ignorant, and it was such a new practice in this community.
It was so fringe.
Yes. Another thing about the yoga temple she attended, it was her and Helen made plans on Saturday. Helen was her Swami. They were going to go
guide. Yeah. Mentor.
Yeah. So her and the Swami Helen made plans for shopping. So Helen couldn't get a hold of Karen and sent her husband to the apartment on Saturday, and that's how she was found. So the connection to yoga is a huge one in this story.
And then the church connection is just so obvious.
Yeah. Don't insult me by going there.
And the trauma, the community, not only the community that was reeling from Karen's brutal murder, but also the community that rallied around Steve.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right.
And it still haunts the neighborhood.
I bet it does.
That building's still there, Jen.
Is it? We drove past it.
Both the Good News Mission building and her apartment is still there on the same side of the street.
That's insane. Now I want to drive by and take a look and feel some feels. Hey, what do you think about the whole massacre / ambush? Like that idea of an ambush.
I think that he
surprised her.
Right, with the tire iron. Everything was going fine, and then all of a sudden, he brought out a tire iron.
Wow.
I think the catching of the breath is that he used her nightgown to restrain her when he did.
Yeah, what he did.
And I think that at that point, that's why she probably went into a yoga meditation and was like, this is my body, not my soul. And that's why her hands were like that.
Right. Wow. And I bet that brought her some peace at the end. You know what I mean? Just knowing, because she knew that the physical world is not all there is.
You're really good at abstractly compartmentalizing in moments. Can you describe what that might feel like or what that might have been like for her to like detach?
Yes, it's like taking your awareness of your physical body and the physical space around you and shifting your awareness outside of that into a broader sort of energetic field. So you're not in it. You know, it's like you know, like when you're meditating, you kind of forget that you have fingers, like you can't feel them because they're still and you're not moving and you're not thinking about your fingers. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and you're
absolutely.
thinking about like your energy and you go to another place, dream state, meditative state. It's kind of like that. So I believe she probably put herself in that sort of pseudo meditative state. If she was studying to be a Swami, she certainly would have been able to do that.
Yeah. And even though her death is horrible, that gives me a sense of peace. It's like she was already, it was just her body, not her soul.
Right, exactly. Mm-hmm. And so in that sense, he couldn't really hurt her, could he?
Right.
Not really. Just maybe the shell this time around. The shell of what she was.
That's why the hands were so important to me.
Yes, I love that. It moves me a little bit to know that you and I were literally 2 miles, maybe, Jill, from this community. Like from you and I were living.
Yeah,
you were a baby. I was older, but we were both alive.
So close.
And so close to these events.
Yeah, I would say walking distance. I mean, I wouldn't want to, but how many times did we walk to Lake Street?
Yeah. So that gives me a little bit of a chilly feeling knowing that we were alive during this situation. Yeah. And the other thing that is so interesting. Go ahead.
I was just thinking, like, Mom got the Tribune, like, for years.
I wonder if Mom read about it.
Yeah, that's a scary situation. Because Mom was a single mom at the time. Yeah. When I was born, Dad was already out of the house. So here we are with a brood of kids living in Forest Park, just 2 miles away from this horrific murder.
And then the other thing that I want to talk about when we get to detours is the way I believe Steve 100%. Do you believe Steve 100%?
I do.
Yeah. I believe that Steve did have a psychic vision. And I can recognize in his accounts and the way he used words mimics the way I see and feel things when I get a vision.
I understand completely.
Yeah.
But I also want to say that you can't just be going up to police with that shit.
No.
You have to really have the discernment. Like, how will this help? What if the crime scene is in the apartment and the police have access to the apartment, they know what's going on. Like, they've seen it. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
The murder weapon they already had. And that's why they were like, why didn't you mention the murder weapon? He's like, what are you talking about? and say I saw the murder weapon.
Right.
You know what I mean? So like, I really do want to break down for people that have these gifts to be like, what is the benefit and what is the cost for me putting myself out there? Because if it's like, I want to be cool and I want to like help, which that's a good, like that's, I feel like that all the time. Like I want to help solve some shit, but you just have to be in a situation where A, you have an alibi, B, this is going to move the case forward. And
so
C,
anonymous tip line. Anonymous tip line.
Tip line.
Tip
so
line.
Let's talk about in detours.
Jail stories.
Wait, his psychic vision.
Okay.
And then we're going to like break it down. And then we're going to talk about, so you're a psychic and you've seen a crime in your mind. What do you do?
Mm-hmm. And then jail stories.
And then I probably have maybe 2 jail stories that is worth
2 jail stories. Wonderful. Meet us at Detours. Hey, you know, Detours were supposed to be about 15 minutes. And now we are talking, and they're all video now. We do the Zoom video. So we usually look terrible. And we just have a blast talking for longer than we should. I think you're cute. Oh, thank you.
I do think you're cute. And it's unedited, which is fun.
Yeah. And embarrassing and fun. And you want to tell the people where they can find us?
Yeah, but what were you going to say first?
Oh, I was just going to say that right now we have 2 people signed up for the class that I'm running starting April 24th.
Tell everyone.
It is a psychic development class for all levels of learners. It is a partner class. It's going to be so much fun. And honestly, if you're on the fence, you guys, it really is a good price. 8 sessions for $200 per person. And I just adore the people that are going to join me. And I know if you're on the fence and you join, you're going to have a good time with us. So I just want to put that out there. Email us at commonmystics@gmail.com if you want to join.
Also, if your child has a birthday coming up, this can be a fun birthday gift for your child and a friend.
I wasn't going to do this for children.
I think like 17-year-olds would benefit from this.
Okay. Anyway, I'm going to have like 5-year-olds and 40-year-olds.
I'm not talking like they have to be potty trained. No, I'm talking about like high school age students would get, I think, value out of this and confidence.
I like it.
Okay.
I'm fine with high schoolers, but little ones, I'm not ready for little ones.
Okay, I'm gonna say my cheesy closing. I upgraded it. Tell me if you like it.
All right, let's hear it.
Thanks for tuning in. Loving Common Mystics? We got more for you. Learn about our mystical world by visiting our website, commonmystics.net. Connect with us, schedule a reading, or just say hi at commonmystics@gmail.com. Follow the magic on all the socials at Common Mystics Pod. Get exclusive content joining us on Patreon for bonus episodes and monthly mystic meetups. Thanks so much to our patrons. They're literally keeping the lights on, and you can support us on any level that is good for you. And you are making this programming possible.
I love it.
Thank you.
Very good. All right. Love you. Thanks for this. This was a good one.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.
This has been a Common Mystics Media production. Editing done by Yokai Audio, Kalamazoo, Michigan.